Welcome to another episode of the Goodsugar podcast. I am Ralph Sutton. With me, as always, Marcus Antebi, or as I like to call him, the man on the street.
I am technically the man on the street. I'm always on the move. And today
Like,
I'm
we
downtown.
get it, Marcus. You're so busy.
Well, I'm really excited about our guest, Mrs. Lapine, like the tree that we're bringing on, because a lot of the subjects that she covers are things that are near and dear to me.
Yeah, I know it is for sure. I was excited because I felt like you guys would have a lot of commonality. A couple of side steps first. Excuse me. Number one, which is amazing, Marcus. This is part of what I say. Your body is amazing. Not you specifically, just the
my
general
body.
concept.
Thank you. I really.
The reason why I'm
appreciate that.
saying this is that I just finished a 7-mile run. Okay, came in, took a quick shower, threw on a nice shirt, and we're doing the show. Right? If this was 6 months ago, even 3 months ago, after a 7-mile run, I needed the rest of the day to recuperate. I was dead to the world. Right? I could handle 3, maybe 4, but anything more than that, I would be in pain. I would have aches. I couldn't do anything. And it's amazing to me how much your body needs or wants to adapt. It's fascinating to me.
Oh, you said it perfectly. The body, the human body, and all living creatures, the body is a highly adaptive machine.
It's amazing. And the more you push it, you have to go. I mean, it's also it's a fine-tuning experiment of pushing, not just, you don't want to push through pain. Like if you're actually hurting,
sometimes,
I don't know. It depends on the pain. Maybe on comfortability.
You better push through the pain if you fell into the Atlantic Ocean off a boat and you got to swim back to shore. You better have a mechanism for pushing through the pain, or you're going to drown.
I'll agree with you there. But like the fact that I did, feel like the last couple of weeks I was focusing more just on the running because I really want to do that half marathon and then a couple of weeks of recovery. But now this week I'm back to doing the yoga, the Peloton. I still do the meditation every day, but I'm shocked when I look at, 7 miles. For me, it's an unfathomable number to do 7 miles and then just be okay. And it shows you that, this show's a little over a year old. If you go back a year ago, I couldn't run a mile. It's nuts.
Right. So I think that's amazing progress to say. And it's other than saying that the body is highly adaptive, which is cliche, the other thing that you have to add to it is it's an extraordinary healing machine. And when you combine those two things together, wow, how do we fuck it all up? You have a highly adaptive machine that's incredible at healing, and yet we still find a way to intoxicate it and to break it down faster than it should.
Right, which, by the way, ties in beautifully with our guest, which I'll explain in a second. But I also happen to know, on a completely side personal note, your dad's in town. Are you going to see him while he's here?
Yeah, I saw him yesterday. It was great. We came and he saw our little Nova, who's 2 months old, and it was just so delicious. And it was really a nice moment for me to share that with my pops.
Yeah, are you surprised that I know your dad's in town?
No, well, you're connected. You're connected, right? Your Uncle Elliot, my dad are good friends. Your mom and my dad are good friends. So, word gets around.
Word gets around, that's for sure. Okay, so now the reason why I think it's a great time, like you just said, the body being adaptive and people going through health issues and other things like that, I think our guest today, it all kind of ties in perfectly.
Well,
yes. Go ahead.
I was going to say is, what I'm going to do on this show is, because I really respect our guests, is I'm just going to sit quietly for as long as I can, and then I'll probably have a rant or a diatribe in there. Stylistic.
Wait a minute. Are you going to tell me that you're going to have a rant? This is shocking to me.
I know. I'm sorry.
All right, we talked about her enough. Let's bring her on right now. The name is Phoebe Lapine. She is a food and health writer, gluten-free chef, podcast host, author of SIBO Made Simple, and the podcast name as well. She has also a bunch of other stuff we're going to get into, but thank you so much for joining us, Phoebe.
Thanks for having me.
I said it wrong off air, but it's Lapine like the tree. How often do you say that in your life? At least once a day?
You know what? I'm embarrassed to say that I just came up with that correction, like in this book tour process.
Really, that's crazy. It seems like such a logical concept. So let's start with just first off, I do the research. Marcus has the bevy of knowledge far exceeding mine in this space. So I'm the one that will go and look up people and look up things that pop out at me, right? So the first thing I saw that I would love elaboration on is your self-proclaimed healthy hedonist. Can you explain a little bit about what that means to the average person?
Yes. So I would say the official definition is where kind of the Venn diagram where the things that nourish your body meet the things that feed your spirit. So it can be anything. It could be a French fry. It could be a bath. It could be a walk outside. It can run the whole gambit, but anything that kind of makes you happy, but then also feeds your body in some way.
Okay, so because I saw even on your blog, which usually you don't see a lot with people that are health conscious, I think you were eating ribs at one point. I saw a kale margarita thing. Like, so you're condoning healthy changes, but not like, also you said something about don't make these changes all at once, which we all say. You did something where you did a change 1 month at a time. Is that right?
Yes, that was kind of the basis for my book / real world experience called The Wellness Project. And yeah, kind of the end goal was to find that balance between health and hedonism. And, it's not like a specific recipe for anyone. I just think by kind of doing certain experiments or trying new things with awareness, you can better kind of create your own pro and con list in your head and find a toolkit for where those two things meet. And, not any one thing has to fit perfectly in the middle. It's about, constantly evening the scales.
Right. I mean, one
day
thing
in, day out.
We talk about this a lot on the show. I don't like anybody that casts a net like this is for everybody, because every body is different.
Yeah.
Every person assimilates things differently. So there is no one solution. You have to find what works with you. There are two major topics I want to get into, because one is near and dear to Marcus's heart, which we'll get into secondly. But firstly, your newest book is it's about SIBO, right? SIBO,
yes.
which SIBO Made Simple is also the name of the podcast. When I saw that, I got to be honest with you, my first instinct was, well, what the fuck is SIBO? I didn't know what that was, and I had to look it up. And it's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Is this a very common problem? I don't know anything about it. I'm sure Marcus does. But in reading it and seeing it, that was my first instinct. I got to look up what this is.
Yes. So I'd say that the diagnosis is still in its nascency, but as a condition and issue, it is incredibly prevalent. They're now saying that 60% of all IBS cases are actually being caused by this specific acute issue that is SIBO.
All right, and can you elaborate a little bit on what is it? Like, what does that even mean?
Okay. So I think there's a lot of issues currently with how we talk about quote unquote gut health, a lot of dumbing down that happens kind of in the wellness zeitgeist. And what people don't really realize is that when, doctors, scientists, what have you, are talking about your quote unquote good gut bacteria, they're primarily talking about the large intestine. That's where you have, your largest population. It's where it actually assists in the process of digestion. Of course, every single element of your digestive tract has its own ecosystem, and there is bacteria other places, but the small intestine is not designed to withstand a lot of critters. It's where you absorb your nutrients. So when there are other, beings at the table competing for that food, it can cause a host of problems. And, when bacteria eat food, they release gas. And when it's now too far away from an exit ramp, that's when it kind of gets trapped, can cause really uncomfortable bloating, can cause burping, farting, and like kind of a whole host of autoimmune spectrum issues, as the bacteria themselves can damage the gut lining and cause something called intestinal permeability or leaky gut. And then, there's kind of a whole downwind list of symptoms from there: weight loss or weight gain, depending on what types of critters are overgrowing. Of course, mood issues, since so much of your serotonin is produced in the gut, food sensitivities. The list really goes on.
It seems like in the past 5 years, the focus on the gut, and it's funny because the gut to me, prior to the past 5 years, seemed like a layman term, like you're getting punched in the gut or whatever. It never felt like, you would never hear a doctor. It's like saying, oh, you have a problem in your ass. A doctor wouldn't say that, So gut to me always seemed not like the proper scientific term, but apparently it is. And this seems to be a prevalent issue that is backtracking to a lot of problems, whether, like you said, a lot of autoimmune diseases, a lot of like gluten allergies, all these things could be traced back to gut health. Is that a good assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. Autoimmune diseases in particular. And SIBO is kind of this weird nexus of a lot of these conditions. I started a podcast on this when I felt like my audience and other people were in need of resources shortly after I was diagnosed. And I thought it was going to be like a 12 episode, kind of like you get diagnosed, here's what you do, everything you need to know. And because so many other gut related issues kind of tie back to SIBO or to other aspects of your digestive system, it just snowballed from there. And 50 episodes in, I finally shut it down. But
it doesn't necessarily, like if you're someone like me who farts often, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have gut health issues. What should someone look for to say, oh, maybe I'm a candidate for this and I need to look into this further?
Sure. So, the main symptoms dovetail with IBS. So the gas and the bloating, constipation, diarrhea are a mixture of the two. But I'd say that people with SIBO really feel that distension higher up and immediately after eating, because these symptoms are directly tied to food, because it's, you eating your food and your bacteria eating that same food. So someone who's very, very reactive to certain foods, and it's not like a once in a while kind of thing, it's like every time you eat, that kind of points to SIBO. But, there are also people who kind of have much more insidious symptoms. Every case of SIBO is kind of different. In general, the gut microbiome is more unique than a fingerprint. So you have to think that that is the same case, whether it's in the small intestine or the large intestine.
And now I'm curious about how you align with Marcus on this, with like in terms of what you can do to start trying to get that under control. I assume it's mostly dietary?
No, actually. This is actually an issue that does need some sort of treatment in a lot of cases. So there's kind of a more natural route that involves herbal antimicrobials. There's a specific antibiotic for SIBO and some more broad spectrum ones that are sometimes used. And then there's something called the elemental diet, which is not a diet. It's like a medical shake. But then, of course, you're dealing with the gut. So I'd say that diet is very important, but more for kind of the healing phase after that.
So
and then also there are people who kind of deal with chronic SIBO.
I'm sorry, continue.
Exactly. So people deal with chronic SIBO because they haven't figured out the reason why they got SIBO in the first place. It's not like it's a disease in and of itself. It's really just a sign that something's gone wrong in the digestive system to cause this overgrowth, often several things. So, in the kind of healing process, treatment process, it's so important to kind of dig a little bit further and find those root causes. Otherwise, it could just be an ongoing thing.
Yeah, because one thing I've noticed, I've never been super insightful in how I feel after I eat certain things, which I think a lot of people should just think about. Oh, when I eat a lot of bread, I feel bloated and disgusting. Maybe you have a gluten allergy. Like if I eat ice cream and I go to the bathroom and shit myself for 20 minutes, maybe you have a lactose intolerance. A lot of people don't make those associations. They just think, oh, that's just what happens when you eat ice cream. And people who don't really think about the health track back to what's going on in their system.
Right. But I would say that even for those people, coming to that conclusion, I have a gluten sensitivity or I'm lactose intolerant, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a long-term thing. Like specifically for SIBO, a lot of people have really, really reactive issues with food. And once you kind of clear up, again, the root cause being SIBO, and then the root cause of the root cause being why you got SIBO in the first place, you can start to diversify your diet more and eat some foods that you once loved.
Am I right in saying that you have a gluten allergy, you have SIBO, and you also had something called Hashimoto's? Am I right with that?
Yes, the gluten is kind of more tied to the Hashimoto's than the SIBO, but the SIBO is definitely tied to the Hashimoto's, which was one of my root causes.
So Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disease, correct?
It is, yeah.
So that was the cascading effect for all the other issues in your life, you feel?
Well, it all kind of, so there are a lot of flowcharts in my book. It's all a vicious cycle. So I think I got Hashimoto's because of a parasite or food poisoning experience in Morocco, coupled with a few other things. But then because of my Hashimoto's, kind of, it has a halo effect on the gut's ability to do its job too. So it just becomes a vicious cycle at a certain point.
Because one of my best friends, she actually had a gluten-free bakery in New York City. Her name is Jennifer Esposito. It was called Jennifer's Way. She was the first person I ever met who had celiac. And at the time, we're going back like 6 years, nobody knew what the fuck that was. It was such an unknown thing. And it was a cascading effect where she became having more and more health issues, all leaning back to this autoimmune disease that was celiac. So I don't know if there's anything people can do on a annual health basis to go get checked out to see if they are a candidate for any one of these potentially life-altering autoimmune problems.
Yeah. And, celiac actually has a huge overlap with SIBO. And it's why it's so important, again, to kind of figure out what your root causes are, because if you're just trying to deal with the SIBO, but it's actually being caused by this autoimmune disease that actually is very, very serious, can make you at a higher rate for cancer and risk factors for other autoimmune diseases. You need to know that.
Right, for sure. Absolutely. Now, the other post of yours that jumped out at me, because this is directly in line with Goodsugar, Marcus is opening up an official Goodsugar restaurant, and it's all about the no reusable, no single-use plastics, it's all about recycling 100%. There's nothing. It's all glass or reusable bottles and whatnot. And you did a whole thing on recycling. So you both kind of, your Venn diagram combines there even further. Is that something that when you put up that post, you did your research on this? Is it something you knew you've been an advocate of for a long time? It was one of your newest posts on your blog.
Yeah. I mean, I've been trying to transition to a more low waste lifestyle for a long time. Kind of per all of my health changes, it has been a slow process with a lot of baby steps, but it is absolutely something I'm very passionate about. And I do think that in terms of Venn diagramming, low waste living has a huge impact on just your overall health and limiting the amount of toxin exposures. And obviously, everything that we do on an individual and more importantly, corporations do on a macro level does eventually bleed down to like the health of the food system as a whole and what you're eating, no matter what it is.
I mean, the amount of microplastics that are showing up in food is shocking. It really is.
Crazy.
I think microplastics are delicious.
They are delicious. They add flavor. It's like the MSG of the sea.
So, I'm trying to organize all my responses and thoughts. And I realized while you guys were talking that I think probably the most difficult thing that I have with all the information in my head is organizing it and then expressing it in a way that other people can remain interested and understand. So I'm taking a new approach as an operator to go step by step. So first thing I want to say is that thank you for being on the show, and thank you very much for how well you articulate your ideas. And I think that you're very enlightened and you have a great deal of knowledge. And I would say that what I understand about these things, I think is not necessarily in competition or controversial. I think it's additive to what you speak about. And I think that in my former life, I probably would have been more combative, more challenging in the way I speak, rather than say to you, well, why don't you think about this? Since I could see the type of thinker you are, you're a deep thinker. And since the purpose of the conversation is to try to compassionately help people who struggle and suffer, including ourselves, I think it's a better management tool to say to you, why don't you think about this and come back when you might have a different way of approaching it. So my school of thought is that there's no such thing as an autoimmune disease, because I've been studying the body for 25 years, and I believe that the body is a divinely created machine with infinite wisdom, and I can't believe, sorry about that.
What you're saying must be true. There's an alarm going off.
No, I do not believe, and neither from the words of my master in food, that there's such a thing as the body destroying itself. And usually every time we find an autoimmune disease, it's scientists trying to explain something that they don't have the answer to yet. So one of the things I would say about the digestive system is that if you really were able to show people to it in a very accurate way, it's the size of a universe. So much intricacy going on and on the microcosm of the digestive system, we probably know about 0.5% of what we will possibly know on what's actually going on in there, including how the body and the mind communicate to the digestive mechanical system. So the first thing is, I would say, is 100% that everything that happens in the mechanical body has an explanation. There's a root cause. And at some point in science, they'll be able to say, here's what's causing that, and perhaps have a solution to it. Certainly when a person gets to a point where they have debilitating illness, there's no amount of self-help remedy that's going to help them. And that, the way I describe that is, the body is a miraculous healing machine until it closes down and is not open for a natural healing, and then you need some kind of intervention. The problem is that in Western medicine is that intervention usually has a side effect downwind,
of course,
somewhere in the system. And so what I'd like to tie in with you, because this is my passionate subject, is I would like to tie in, if we had time and we could be methodical about this, I would start from day one of your life, breast milk versus formula, vaccination versus not vaccination, antibiotic treatments, emotional and psychological components, exercise, alcohol, plant-based versus animal protein-based, to look at the entire system so that you can really start mapping things in a way that's scientific and not abstract. If you understand, when you mentioned about a parasite, I happen to agree with that. A parasite could be a cause, but also there could be psychological components, and there could be antibiotic treatments in your past that are a component. I just don't believe in the autoimmune paradigm.
Are you saying, Marcus, that all autoimmune diseases could be cured through diet?
I know, I didn't say that. What I'm saying is that
asking for clarification.
Let's take a step back. Let's take a step back to a point in a person's history where diet plays a tremendous role, obviously, in how the entire body functions, including the digestive system. Anybody that would refute that is going 65 years back into science history. You understand? So we understand that the diet plays a dramatic role. Now, everyone's different. You, Ralph, might have a more forgiving chemistry, meaning you can eat garbage for 50 years of your life and nothing happens, where someone else might be more sensitive because no two people are in the same place at the same time. There's some people, they have one thing the wrong way and it's like an atomic bomb went off in their system. So that's where people get confused. Like, in other words, everyone's running around eating ice cream, jumping around on a hot summer day. The lactose intolerant person has a spoonful and they're in a coma for 3 days. So if we take a step back, we can say that there was a point before this thing became impossible for a natural healing. And we have to look at that first and then say, okay, obviously, if you're trying to do home remedies and you don't want to be, taking 19 different medications, you're going to have to make some dramatic lifestyle changes. And the lifestyle changes, they're obvious across the board. Everyone has an immediate improvement in their chemistry when they get rid of dietary mistakes. You cannot refute that. It wouldn't even be an intelligent discussion to say that that's not actually true.
Well, I'm sure, Phoebe, you would agree that, at least to start with, that when you started getting your diet under control and eating healthier, that you did start noticing a huge difference in your health, right? I would imagine.
Oh, yeah. I mean, The Wellness Project is a 300-page book about all of the tinder that was added to my box over the years, including many things that you mentioned, including being a C-section baby and yada, 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 a lot of antibiotics. Of course, all of these things add up. And yeah, The Wellness Project had nothing to do with really supplementation or medication at all. It was all about kind of the common sense lifestyle changes that we all need to make. And yet, because corporations can't sell them to you necessarily, we don't talk about enough, like, water and and sleep and stress management and all of that.
It's a 360-degree approach. And when you have acute problems, the approach becomes more mission critical. So in other words, people who are not suffering, they don't have to look at this shit until they have a problem or reach bottom, or something elevates them quicker. And they're like, you know what? I want to focus in on this stuff. If I could ask you some honest questions, it helps me a lot to have a fair and honest conversation with you. So I would get right into what your paradigms are when it comes to overall diet and alcohol consumption. Where do you sit on the spectrum with that stuff for yourself and for what you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are times when you need a more extreme approach. And then again, depending on your body, depending on what you can handle, then, again, that's kind of like the whole point of healthy hedonism. For some people, that might mean no alcohol. For me, I've been able to find some moderation, but certainly whenever I'm feeling inflamed or like there's an issue, sugar, alcohol, caffeine are the first things that come out before I make any changes.
What kind of sugar?
For me, all added sugar.
Okay, so you mean refined and processed sugar. You don't mean that you eliminate eating an apple.
No, not whole fruit. But even, honey, maple syrup, what have you, I just try and limit that. Again, this is not how I live my life on a daily basis, but when I need some sort of reset and, for Hashimoto's especially and thyroid health, like your liver is so important. And I do think that those three vices are you,
sorry, go ahead. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Those three vices are the biggest things that you can see an impact for your liver if you take. Are you
on a thyroid medication like Synthroid?
Not Synthroid, but yeah, desiccated pig thyroid.
Okay, all right, that's interesting. And so, and are you on a calorie restrictive diet, or do you pretty much eat whatever you want? Okay, no, that's important.
No, I mean, I focus on like whole food nutrition. I'm a chef. And so, I'm always about finding ways to incorporate really nutrient rich ingredients and vegetables and fiber and whatnot. But I do, skew ideologically more omnivore.
Okay, that's good. And so what of the animal proteins that you do eat, what would you say is your go-to staple animal protein? Obviously, you're probably not eating snails and snakes, but what would you say more than other things is your go-to animal protein?
Wild fish and seafood. Microplastics be darned.
Be damned. Yeah. Looking at your, by the way, blog, I love the baked salmon that went up recently. It looked fantastic. I tend to be predominantly fish-based as well. I am probably way too much sushi. I actually had mercury poisoning a few years ago from ODing on sushi.
Nice. Yeah. I just have a couple of other questions I'd like to ask if you don't mind sharing. How many times a week are you having anything animal protein?
Probably half the week. We eat pretty plant-based. My husband's a pescatarian, so I eat some animal protein meat on my own, but it's not that often.
So what you said when you first started, I agree with, and I think it's really important, and I amplify this, is that a person's happiness plays a tremendous role in their chemistry. Mm. And it's interesting when you look at people who have been studied, who live a very, very long time without health problems, they don't necessarily have the cleanest diet.
Yeah.
The problem with that is you can't prescribe that to the general population because mostly everybody would die. So there's something in those people that have been studied that have great longevity that don't have a clean diet. There's something that they have, which I believe is in their positive attitude combined with the fact that all of them don't eat very much.
Look, my grandfather lived to 93. He smoked a pack of cigarettes a day and ate nothing but garbage. So there are those outliers.
And you can't prescribe that. You can't say because of him, everybody should smoke.
It's anecdotal. There's no science behind it.
What you said is your happiness plays a big part in your health and wellness, and I believe that. So then what I would ask you then is, does that mean that what you're saying, and just correct me if I'm just assuming the wrong way, is you're saying that you've always been a person who loves food, and if you had to be too restrictive, you probably would feel unhappy, and that would have a negative impact on your chemistry.
Yeah, absolutely. But, that kind of the scales change as you age and as your priorities shift. I'd say I'm a different person today than when I started the wellness project, when I finished the wellness project, and my diet kind of has moved over time to be even cleaner because it's just not worth it to me to have a stomach ache
I could not agree more. Like not that it was a health, it's just more mental issue. I would never dreamed 5 years ago that I would go a month without having a steak or a hamburger. Like I was like, that is never going to happen, I thought. And now it's a rarity to have something like that. You know, most of my diet is fish based, and once in a while a treat like that, and I get excited.
Like once in a while, you love to eat cat. You just love.
Well, I will have
meat.
a cat, but I'll murder the cat myself, and then it's far more enjoyable because it's direct farm to table that way.
So from my strange experience with food in juice press. By the way, I sold juice press 2 years ago. I'm out of juice press now. So whatever juice press is today has nothing to do with me. Very grateful for the experience. I'm on to something else. But my strange experience is working with people with wacky problems as a retailer of something, trying to come up with solutions for tens of thousands of people. And then incidentally, meeting some really great endocrinologists and different types of gastrointestinal people or somebody oncologists and nutritionists, and really clinging to them to try to understand what's going on. And what I've learned is that, yes, you know what, you're right. If I went to my dad right now, who's 80 and he's overweight, and I said, Dad, I'm sorry, you're going to Guantanamo Bay where we're going to slide your food under the door for the next 5 months of your life, he would probably die in his cell. Even if we were serving him the right thing, the shock would be too much. And so
I'm going to give you a very loose example. My other podcast, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, which is a 180 of this show. And I worked with all these like famous rock stars and shit. And I hosted this thing called the Motorhead Cruise, which was the band Motorhead. And Lemmy, who passed away a few years ago, he would be given a certain amount of actual drugs every day because like actual, I think it was speed or something, because he did so much of it for his life that the doctors figured if he went cold turkey, he would probably die. So they kept him on a low dose of that throughout the rest of his life, which is pretty crazy. Anyway, let's do this. I want to wrap up real quick. So the Wellness Project was more about, that's kind of done now, right? Is Feed Me Phoebe your main focus right now?
Yeah, I mean, I have lots of things on the back burner. But yes, I'm working on a new book concept. But yeah, the SIBO book just came out in January. So I've been doing a lot of speaking around that. But do not intend for that to be my life's work. It was just a resource for people. And now I kind of have turned into like SIBO Wiki on Instagram, and I will eventually move away from that.
Yeah.
But yes, Feed Me Phoebe is kind of always where you can find me.
Right. And you also have PhoebeLapine.com as well, but it seems like Feed Me Phoebe is the main focus page for what you do, right?
Yeah, that's where I kind of publish new recipes and whatnot and kind of figure out my next steps, write my way towards my next field of interest.
And it's at Phoebe Lapine on Instagram. And by the way, I would say kudos on a very attractive backdrop. It just looks like
the background is I'm so envious.
Oh, right now? Really thanks. My office.
It's a good backdrop. It makes you look authoritative, but like also welcoming. It's a good vibe you got going on there.
Perfect.
Yeah. So thank you so
Phoebe,
much.
I have one final statement. I would love, I'm not saying it has to happen, I would love to sit quietly with you and my very dear friend, Fred Bishi. He's 92. He's one of the smartest guys I know on the mechanics of the body and digestion. He's a nutritionist for 60 years, incredible accomplishments with his diet. I'd love to sit and talk with you because I geek out on this stuff. And I think we have a lot to exchange, which probably would not really be the right format as this podcast to go even deeper into this.
But we're all in New York City, so I'm sure it's more logical that might actually happen. So
I'm happy to come sit in a quiet place and chat.
Phoebe, anything else you want to plug before we wrap this up?
No, you know where to find me. You just told everyone.
All right. By the way, just to all of our listeners, my other show, the SDR show, really good episodes coming out. They're doing 2 at a time now, and some really cool guests coming on. We just had Danny Bonaducci on. We have Def Leppard coming on, a really cool thing. And also, when this podcast airs, my reunion episode with the Queer Eye for the Straight Guys has come out on E! Entertainment. It's called Reunion Road Trip. That is out now on E! And, of course, follow me everywhere at I Am Ralph Sutton. I know Marcus never likes to plug anything, but anything you want to plug, Marcus?
I'm really into plugging friendly bacteria in the digestive system.
All right. I knew that was coming. All right. Thank you so much for listening to GSP, and we'll see you next week on the Good Sugar Podcast. Thank you very much, Phoebe.